Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Stacy Moore.
Stacy, what movie are we going to overanalyze this week?
This week we're overanalyzing Coco, the animated tale of 12-year-old Miguel Rivera who finds himself stranded in the land of the dead with his late ancestors. He only has a few hours to obtain a blessing from his great-great-grandfather so he can return to his family in the land of the living or else be trapped on the other side forever.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. What did we think?
I liked so much of the animation and the visuals of this movie, but the story got a little bit... Oh, it had two kind of big flaws for me. What did you think?
I enjoyed it a lot. I personally connected with the story, and like you said, the visuals were gorgeous. But so what was sort of catching for you?
I just thought because somebody a long time ago in the family left to play music, now no one in the family can play music, it just didn't hang together for me. How did it feel to you?
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, that was a pretty potent residual grudge they were holding. I thought it was when they first started laying out the exposition and that really cool sequence at the beginning with those, they looked like sort of paper flags that had been cut out. Mm-hmm. And we learned his ancestral story through these flags. I thought that the musician who left was going to be his grandfather, and that
right.
The daughter Coco was his mom, and it's
right.
like there's an extra 2 generations in there that transpire between Coco and Miguel. And I was like, wow, like the granddaughter, Imelda is the matriarch whose husband leaves to become a musician, and Coco is their daughter, who is Miguel's great grandmother. And
yes,
I was like, wow, that's a powerful grudge Imelda had to keep the 5th generation down. They're still being told not to even sing in the house.
Yeah, it just seemed a little bit like, I don't know. It kept, every scene where they were like, you can't play music, and there were a lot of them, it just struck a sour note with me because I thought, okay, this is a strange grudge to hold, and they needed a more convincing, more plausible reason as to why he couldn't play music than a long time ago. Yeah, several ancestors back, somebody left to play music. So I did think towards the end, all the many different twists and turns that kept him from going back just got a bit tiring at some point. I was just like, okay, now, the picture, now the dog, now the big cat winged thing. I just like,
the griffin or whatever
just
it was.
Go. Yeah, just go. Like, it's getting to be too much now.
Pretty much any time he was about to touch a blessing marigold petal, I'd be like, all right, what's going to swoop in and stop him this time?
Right. And I was like, enough. It was too long a conclusion. Although the first time he gets sent back, to give a little plot exposition, he needs a blessing from his family he mistakenly wanders into the land of the dead and then needs a blessing to get back to the land of the living from an ancestor. And the first time his Mama Imelda, the matriarch of the family, gives him the blessing, but then says, you're not allowed to play music. So he touches the pedal, he pops back to where he was. He picks up a guitar,
like first thing. First thing, he's like, thanks, Mommy Imelda, peace.
Yeah, I'm like 2 seconds later, and then he pops back into the land of the dead for violating the conditions. And she goes, it took you 2 seconds. So that was pretty funny.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love pretty much all the interactions with Mommy Imelda and Oh, who was I guess he just called her his abuelita, who would be constantly wielding their shoes at people like they were nunchucks.
Yes.
Anytime anyone
well, they are
pissed them
shoemakers.
off, they were all cobblers. Yeah. It was this cobbling dynasty, I guess. That was the family business. And they would just, whenever someone was just really giving them a hard time, they would just take off a shoe without even thinking about it, like swing it around and just like take their head off with it, essentially.
Yes.
I enjoyed all those.
Yes. But for the animation alone, I mean, the skeletons in the Land of the Dead, all of them were just amazing and cool, and just what a visual to have. Mm-hmm. How they moved, how they looked, how they were skeletal but not super scary, but not so not made so cute that it sapped them of
morbidity.
I guess.
Right?
Yes, well put.
Yeah, every set piece was beautiful from the docks, the sort of like mangy docks where all of the forgotten, the folks without families kind of like have made a found family together, to the really shishi tower club that Ernesto de la Cruz has, where it's all electro swing or electro, I don't know, bachata or something, and like his old films projected on the wall, and like just like the hippest club you've ever seen in your life. Everything in between. Every single layout was just fun to look at and fun to enter.
Yeah, and I liked how they blend, different people die at different times. They have different music genres, different style genres, to sort of reflect, if you died in the 20s versus if you died in the 60s, what era is contemporary for you, was all kind of mixed together, which I really thought was fun.
I loved the cameo by Frida Kahlo. It felt a little I felt a little uncomfortable with it at first, but when she started, she's got this like, I don't know, performance art piece that she does to open a concert, and she's describing it. She's like, so like, 36 me's come out of this papaya, and they climb this cactus, which is also me, and they drink her tears. Is it too obvious? And I was laughing pretty hard at that. I loved how all the film clips that Ernesto was in looked like 1930s and 40s films. Like there was something about it that, you know what I mean? Like there's something about the texture of it. It really did look like an old black and white film. And yeah, the music was, I was hoping you would be able to kind of just go off on the music in this. It was a huge element. It was like a character in the film, don't you think?
It was. One more thing on the animation, though. Mama Coco herself, as a very, very, very old woman, was so beautifully and lovingly rendered.
Yes.
In her wrinkles and her gnarled hands, and
her skin was beautiful.
Yeah, the character work, or the drawing work that went into that, I just thought was incredible. Like, really, just kind of what you think about Pixar, just taking it to another level. And
when he falls in that sinkhole with the water, I remember thinking, God, that water looks great. And then I remembered, oh yeah, they're Pixar. They know water, like we've kind of got water down, guys.
And how I thought it was so cool. I kept sort of noticing how real Miguel's hair looked.
They do hair well too. Yeah.
Well, but then Hector's hair looked very much like a wig, and I was like, how are they doing that? How do they make the hair on the head look like hair on the head? Yes. And how do they make the wig hair? Like, it was so amazing, and I spent way too much time, like, obsessing about how they drew people's hair differently, so it looked fake in one case and real in the other. And
right.
I just so amazing. I did love the music. I did love the songs. I did furiously look to see who was singing them and find out that through the magic of technology, apparently, Benjamin Bratt and who plays Ernesto de la Cruz, like Mexico's basically Frank Sinatra, and Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays Hector, who kind of guides Miguel through the land of the dead. Both did their own singing.
Really? I wondered about that.
Yeah. And Benjamin Bratt was like, kind of like, I'll post this interview. It was like, it was the magic of technology. Like, I don't sing that well.
So they made them sound better than they did naturally?
Yeah, they did. Okay. He's like, I can't just straight sing a song. Like, and they gave him they gave him both vocal coaches and stuff. He said he was glad to find out that Garcia Bernal was like equally nervous about having to do the singing. But the little kid, the guy who played Miguel, he did his own singing and is a singer.
He was great. I loved all his musical numbers.
And it really captured that sort of 1940s style really well. I mean, because I've heard music from that era, and it doesn't sound, I mean, there are definitely like Mexican elements to it, of course, but it doesn't sound like mariachi music at all. So I thought I thought the songs were really beautiful.
Well, I was just going to say, I was thinking about today that I can't, most of the songs, I can't actually remember them, ironically, except for Remember Me, which is so sweet. And when I actually did, as I mentioned earlier, I really did connect with the story so that, like, at the end, during the sort of the resolution, through music, the family kind of comes back together and the issues are all resolved. And I was an emotional wreck. Like I was in a theater with maybe like 3 or 4 other families with and they all had little kids, and I was desperately like trying to keep it together so as not to like upset the children around me. But as soon as I left, I had to just like sob for a minute because it was just so touching to me how the story resolves. And there's no really any surprises. I will say that every single thing that happens in the movie you see coming about 30 to 40 minutes beforehand. But that didn't kind of take away anything from when it actually does play out. Like it is actually just as satisfying to finally see what you thought was going to, or what you were waiting for to actually transpire and work out and kind of fall into place. But yeah, that one song, Remember Me, was really sweet. The others were super fun to watch and listen to. I just don't remember them.
Yeah, I did. I did want to say, did you get this like very long Frozen introduction?
I did.
To this movie, which I could have lived without and basically hated every minute of, except for when they show people spinning a dreidel and lighting a menorah.
I thought of you.
Okay, they threw the G's in there. I know. So predictable. Yes. And the songs, I found the songs in Frozen, just to go down a sidebar on movie musicals these days, like I find the music just really hasn't lived up to the sort of golden age of the 90s Disney musical. And I found that song in Frozen just annoying and stupid. And just the whole thing was awful. And I simultaneously was really angry that I was being made to watch something this long.
It was
about
super
Frozen.
Long. For a short film, like normally Pixar always shows a short beforehand. But this one I thought about, like, I don't know, 10 minutes in, I was like, how long is this thing? I was like, I
started wondering if me too. I was like, am I in the wrong movie? And also I felt, really angrily robbed of whatever the Pixar short would have been. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I was robbed. I want my Pixar short back, and this stupid Frozen thing gone. And just in terms of like how well Pixar can make kids movies that are watchable by adults, that Frozen thing was just wretched. It was just stupid
Let
and
it out,
boring,
Nicole.
and I hated
Let
it.
it out.
So I want to be like, go see the movie and go like, half an hour late. Just don't subject yourself to that.
Right. One more note on the cast. I thought I did not expect Gael Garcia Bernal to be as funny as he was. I've never seen him in a comedic role, and I thought he did great.
Yeah, I will actually save that for my recommendation. But I always harken back to that John Lasseter, I believe it was, said when they were casting for Toy Story, which was, of course, the very first, full-length computer animated film, he was worried about how cold and sterile computer animation looks. And so he hired voice actors with as much warmth in their voice as he could possibly get to compensate for that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like now we've sort of gotten so used to computer animation doesn't look that way anymore. But I did think Gael Garcia Bernal knocked it out of the park. Just the warmth and the humor in his voice. I hope he gets more voice acting gigs. I thought Alanna Ubach, she kind of floats around. I thought she did a great job. I thought everybody did, and the kid was super engaging.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah. And even Benjamin Bratt, I was thinking, he's not even on screen, and he's still sexy. How does he do that?
Yeah. Well, and I was just sitting there waiting for the credits to roll because I'm like, I know who that is. Again, Gabriel Garcia Bernal, I recognized his voice right away. But Benjamin Bratt, I was like, I know who that is. Who is that? I know. Which is half the fun sometimes of watching these things.
To take a turn, I enjoyed there's a little gag at the beginning, which is part of the world building, where you're seeing kind of TSA, or not TSA, but immigration, or customs maybe, where you're kind of going through. They're having to get to cross the bridge to the other side, and they have to be scanned to make sure their photo is on their family's ofrenda, which is the sort of offering altar where all the photos of the ancestors go. And that's really fun to see who has a photo up and who gets rejected and sent back. And as part of that, they're having to, Miguel's family is having to talk with some bureaucrat. And he says that he's allergic to Miguel's street dog, which I love that his sidekick was a feral street dog. He's just adorable. But he says, I'm allergic. And Miguel says, but this dog has no hair. He has no fur. He's completely bald. And the bureaucrat says, well, I have no nose, but here we are. And I thought that was a great way to kind of just say towards the beginning, look, you're going to be having skeletons who drink liquor, even though they don't have bladders. You're going to be seeing a lot of fun stuff that makes no sense. So please don't sweat the details. Let's just kind of go along for the ride together on this. I thought that was kind of a fun touch. And there is a lot of surreal stuff like that. That's okay, I guess that doesn't make sense, but hell, we're in the land of the dead. And there's griffins, sparkly griffins flying around in Technicolor. So, I'm just going to go with it. Go with them on this.
Yeah, and their clothes are improbable. I love that you can see in Ernesto de la Cruz's body, you can see his pants slung around his pelvic bones. Because there's a little gap between that and he's wearing a jacket with no shirt. And it's just so they do some really funny visuals with the skeletons. I agree.
There's one sort of busty MC lady that you think how does she fill out that dress so well with just her ribs, but she does.
Yes, exactly.
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah, it's her rib cage. Because then they all have impossibly tiny waists because it's just their spine there. I couldn't say enough. Go see this movie just for the visuals. It's totally worth how fun the world building is, and all the skeletons. It's totally worth it.
And why do you reckon it's called Coco after the abuelita?
Because she's the most pivotal character. She's what connects everybody to each other, right?
So she connects the present to the past and the the living to the dead.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And when she forgets, the grandfather's gone forever, right?
Yeah.
Tartabuelo. Or tartarbuelo. Great-great-grandfather. Sorry. Random things I know in Spanish because someone made me read Cien Años de Soledad or 100 Years of Solitude. And there's a lot of generations in that book.
Nice. I love learning the word chamaco because his Hector keeps calling Miguel chamaco, and I had to ask my a Venezuelan family member that later on in the day. I was like, "What's chamaco?" And he's like, "Oh, that's like a Mexican term for like kid." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that makes sense."
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of fun stuff thrown in there like that. And there was some exposition, but there was definitely a good amount of like, it'll make sense or it won't make sense. Just go along with it. This is, it wasn't over-explained, the cultural elements, which I really liked. Although, again, they did explain to you what an ofrenda was and why you had to remember the dead or they would disappear. I do always find it awkward when you mix Spanish and English. When it's like, wait, aren't they supposed to be speaking Spanish the whole time? Like,
well, that's
do you know
kind
what
of
I mean?
a very Mexican-American thing, right? To be kind of living in Spanglish. Even though it takes place solidly in Mexico, but
Mexico is the problem with that, though. Like,
but it was definitely a kind of a Mexican-American vibe that they were developing. But you're right. I did wonder if there were folks that maybe for the longer phrases, if they were like, wait, what did he just say?
Yeah, it's just, again, it's a complicated issue now that now that we have movies where actually people speak the foreign language. It used to be the trend that everybody in a movie, it was set in Germany and everyone would just speak English with a German accent. I think we talked about this when we did Wonder Woman.
Or worse, a British accent.
Yes, exactly. So, but I thought, it's a kid's movie. Like, I'll give it a free pass. It's trying to incorporate certain elements there. And there was, one other thing I wanted to point out. I really loved the Back to the Future shout out.
Where was that? Oh, his
when
fading
he holds
body,
up his hand.
Yes,
I was like, rock on. He has the picture he checks. Like, I was like, thank you, child of the 80s. I got that. So, but this was a good movie about death, right? Alanna Ubach has a interview that I will put in the show notes as well, where she talks about that this is a movie really designed to make kids unafraid of death. And I thought that is a very sort of Latino cultural element that is not at all present here in the United States, where death is like the biggest taboo subject. And everyone's afraid to tell kids that anyone dies or, it's no one's allowed to grieve or be visibly upset. And we have so much of a cultural denial of death.
Yeah, and growing up in the South, it's still kind of. I still kind of do like a little double take when people say that someone died, because in the South we never say that. We never say that word. An animal might die, but a person passes on. A person passes away. And I even remember the more religious folks saying, like, there were some older people, somebody would die and I'd hear them, they would say, he went on to his eternal reward. Like, you never said that someone died. And that you're right, that is very different.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole cultural tradition of Dia de los Muertos, where like everybody has a day where they acknowledge their ancestors who have died and goes to the cemetery and has a party there. It just seems it's so not how we treat death in our culture. But I think is just a really, for me as, someone who's bereaved and had to deal with people just not knowing what to say. And I think that's one of the things too, like when there is a death, no one knows how to react or what to say. So many people are like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, yeah, we don't have any scripts for this. We all act like it never happens. Mm-hmm. And then I'm the rude one for bringing it up.
For
many
mentioning
people I know,
it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, how dare I bring up that my sister died, and make everybody uncomfortable. And I'm like, my sister died. I'm supposed to worry about your momentary discomfort of me bringing up this subject.
Yeah, you're right.
So I did think it was such a wonderful view of, again, the skeletons are skeletons. Like, the dead people are dead. They're not entirely uncreepy or unscary.
They're still dead, but
yeah,
they're not gone, right?
Right. And then the message of the movie is that you have to remember people after they've passed on. And that legacy and putting something worth remembering in the world is what your value is with your time on Earth. How did you feel about that as the message?
I mean, in general, I thought it was really nice. It was really sweet. And like I said, I was very moved by it. It seemed to be it was essentially about family, right? Mm-hmm. And how they can still, in whatever capacity it is, they can still, guide you and care for you in absentia because you remember them, because you remember how they were and how much they cared about you. You still have that no matter what. And that kind of gives you an anchor, it gives you a place in a very big, chaotic universe.
Yes. But then the movie seems to stress that supersedes everything else.
Yes, it did. Mean? Yes, it did.
He didn't have a right to pursue his dream. The original Hector doesn't have a right to pursue his dream of music, and neither does Miguel, because the family is more important than what any individual person may want out of life.
Right. And you're absolutely right. And that is a very different mode of thinking from U.S. culture, right? We place a lot of, importance on individuality and being authentic to yourself, seize your moment. And this movie was, I would say, faithfully so, opposed to that. It said, Hector is, only redeemed when we realized that he didn't choose music over his family, that he actually did try to go back to his family and leave his musical life. And Miguel comes to the realization that, family is more important than his desires to play music. And he only agrees to continue with his musical pursuits after his family gives him their blessing, right?
Right.
To do so. So that was very different. But I think a lot of cultures would be more concerned with, family and regarding the wishes of your family over your own individual wants.
Oh yeah, I used to joke. I mean, in much of South America, you live at home until you get married and then you move next door.
Right.
It's a very enmeshed family structure, which again, I think it runs very counter to American culture, which does not places a lot of emphasis on family, especially at this time of year, but accepts that people are going to leave home and start their own lives, and that starting over with your own nuclear family is completely acceptable. It doesn't have such... I think it's one of the things I really appreciated about the movie, and who is there as his spirit guides is not just Mama Imelda, who's in his direct line. Like, he clearly has great uncles and aunts and, other people there to help him along. as part of the family. So like it's that broader view of that the extended family is just as important as the nuclear family, whereas I think in more typical American culture, we tend to focus on the nuclear family, and people don't necessarily have a sense of their extended family.
Yeah, I noted that his mother and father show up for maybe 3 or 4 lines of dialogue, and we don't even see his mother's face full on for she's in the room talking for maybe 4 or 5 minutes before, not straight, but is in the scene for a while before we actually see her face, and then it's not really focused on. It's just sort of a quick, cut. We don't really know much about his mom and dad. It is, we know way more about his dead great aunts and uncles. Right.
I don't think, I think on the one hand, our culture does sort of, again, it's the holiday season, so I feel like every message I'm getting is just family, 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 and it's getting a bit overwhelming. But I also...
Already? You got a ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, I also have a strong network of extended family. And so often when I talk to other people, they're sort of surprised at how much cousins and aunts and uncles interact.
And I'm presuming, is that on your Italian side?
Yeah, the Jewish family is really traditionally dysfunctional and no one talks to each other.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was thinking, while I watched the movie, I was thinking about something that you said in our last episode about the connection between an Italian American, say, 100 years ago, and Mexican Americans now are kind of in a similar position. And I think there probably are a lot of cultural similarities and being part of an immigrant community in a new place, such as the U.S., typically the U.S., is the family becomes even more important, right? And because you're slightly different, but you have these cultural things in common that you understand. But then over the course of, for the Italian Americans, over the course of the last century, they've become, in many cases, the typical Americans, right? If you think of a Italian American New Yorker, that's almost quintessential American. Now it's considered so. And so, I'm 100 years from now, no one's going to even think of someone who is ethnically Mexican American as being anything but quintessential American. And I hope that sort of that tradition of having family support and family involvement will kind of persist in those communities, because there is definitely some. Well, do you feel like it brings anything extra to your life?
It does, but I guess just to go back to what you said, it made me really think of something. Just the whole immigrant experience, the whole idea of being an immigrant was that you did break with the rest of your family. You left that country to come here. And the extent to which you try to bring them all with you counts for something, but maybe that is why it's such an American idea, that you have to turn your back on tradition. You have to leave your little village or, town and the rest of your extended family to come to America to, quote unquote, make a better life, to pursue a dream. So it does sort of make sense that is the thing that we prize so highly in our culture. Because if we really valued keeping those strong family ties, no one would have left.
Well, I do think it was pretty common, or in most cases, that you would come to America and you would move to a neighborhood where probably you had a lot of extended family already. Or if you didn't, there was at least a neighborhood of people from your home country. And that's kind of how you were able to get set up and establish yourself, right? Is because if you were Italian, you moved to, south of Canal Street in Manhattan. If you were Irish, you were on the south side of Chicago. And there were people like you who knew all your references, who knew your language probably, who cooked all the same food as you, and who maybe grew up in the same village, were nearby. And I think Latin Americans do that to a certain extent as well. There'll be like a Guatemalan neighborhood or Dominican.
We're in the Salvadorian capital.
There you go.
Of the country. There
you go.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And all the Cubans of Florida. I think we're saying the same thing, but I think interestingly, then that becomes part of the American character is chosen family matters too, right?
Sure.
You go and find your community, and that community is no longer your direct relative anymore. Like, they're not your ancestors or your actual blood kin, but they are your community and your support. And then that takes the place of what you left behind. But it's very an American idea. I mean, not that there isn't immigration in other countries. I'm not saying that. And I'm certainly not the expert on other countries' immigration traditions. But I just think it's interesting when we're talking about how we think about family and the stress that we place on it, and the idea of extended family, where Americans we simultaneously believe that you have a right to start over and start fresh and pursue your dreams away from your family, but also believe in the chosen family community as important as well.
Yeah, and I think we definitely live in a neo-local sort of society, and most people don't. It's not even like it was maybe 70 years ago, where most people died within 100 miles of where they were born. Like, I don't think that's the case anymore. Most people move every time they get a new job now, Yeah, and I imagine that, to your point, there's probably a certain type of person. I know there's, there's scientific proof that there's a gene that some people have that gives them a dopamine hit when they go somewhere new. So I think probably the States, I imagine, is full of folks like that. We probably have a much higher incidence of that just because of what you mentioned. Like, we're full of people who, at least by the numbers,
decided to go somewhere new.
Exactly. We're like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go over there. And I don't want to get too, rehash too much of the whole American melting pot, or since I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, or as my sister pointed out, the fruit salad, the American fruit salad. But I think the States is a nation that, if I don't mind saying so, we do it a little better than most places. I mean, there are lots of places with high immigration, like Australia has a lot of different communities. Is just one example, but a lot of nations, especially in Europe, look to the U.S. to kind of see, like, do they make this work? Like, why are we having such trouble? And they don't. And I presume it's because, like, we don't have.
They're like, oh no, they're just as bad off as we are.
I don't think that's the case.
I don't either. But I mean. Recent events may make people think that we're not exactly a model to follow.
Oh yeah, no, sure, yeah, absolutely. We have problems, but it's like, yeah, it's definitely not in most cases like our problems are homegrown. But yeah, it is only recently that I feel like this has even become such a divisive issue. Is like, wait, America, pro-immigrant or anti? And it's like, what? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't realize this was even up for debate. I thought we were solidly in the pro-immigrant camp, since we are all immigrants. And like I said, we've talked about this recently, but I just wanted to touch on that at least briefly. That and Coco doesn't make any statements like we've already covered. It takes place in Mexico, but I do feel like it is a statement, right? It makes a statement just by existing, right? That it's Pixar's big movie of the season, of the holiday season, and it stars a 12-year-old Mexican boy and his Mexican family and their Mexican culture, and it's dazzling and really fun and really emotional, and I would be interested to see if it gets as good a reception as the other Pixar movies do, and I hope it does. I hope it doesn't. I mean, I can't imagine anyone not feeling like it's not accessible to them because of that. It really is something. It seems like a crowd pleaser to me. Huh.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I agree, and I think one of the things too is what is our greatest strength to me in America is to say, like, hey, we don't deal with death that well in this culture. Like,
sure,
maybe this other culture that does really, deals with it a lot better is something that we can sort of borrow and adopt and incorporate, assimilate, if you will, into our own traditions. And I think that is what, to me, makes America a great country. So I really did like. Again, I took some issue with the, like, you have to subsume everything you want to what the family wants. Mm-hmm. It seemed not a message that I wanted any kid to see, but I do think that, thinking of your loved ones who have passed on and remembering them is important and is not something to run away from, but to embrace as the movie does embrace that idea. So I thought that was really beautiful and special, and something that I hope does change things and does sort of pass into the world as and again, the visuals were amazing, so I'm like, hey, Dia de los Muertos stuff is really funky and cool.
It really is.
That gets out into the culture too. I'm good with that as well, and it certainly has. Like, you do sort of see those types of designs pop up in places. So rich cultural heritages are always good, always welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is a beautiful takeaway. And I do hope that, I hope we'll resist commodifying it. I have noticed a lot of Dia de Muertos like merchandise showing up in like Starbucks, and it becomes, I want us to embrace it, but I hope that we'll be sensitive about, what it's actually about, and not just start wearing skull masks. We think they're rad. Like, this is about people's loved ones. Yeah, that have passed on, and we do need to respect that. But given, if we take it in the spirit that you just mentioned, I think that would be awesome.
Okay, well, do you want to give the social impact score?
Absolutely. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it changed nothing and 10 being the world we once knew was gone forever, I think this could be a slow boiling 5.
Okay.
Just for all the reasons that we discussed about there being, it being about a Mexican family, about the traditions of family and death being explored could continue to resonate. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, we haven't done a kids movie in a really long time, and I was excited to do this one because I like kids movies. And I always have to say, like, if you get a kid, that just like automatically lifts your impact score off of, a 0, because it's a child and you can influence children so much better. So I'm with you. I would give it a 4 or 5 for presenting a death in such a different way than probably most kids have ever really thought about it. Probably will spark some conversations with their parents that are necessary to have before someone dies, hopefully. So before Abuelo is gone.
Right.
So and again, in our sort of backlash against other cultures, and particularly Mexican culture, which sort of stands in for all Latino culture, which it is not.
Right.
It was So sort of saying, these are the things, and these are why people have different traditions than us, is really valuable at this moment in time.
Well put. Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to, since you brought it up earlier and it was going to be my recommendation for the week, if you haven't checked out the Amazon original series Mozart in the Jungle, which stars Gael Garcia Bernal in a comedy, and he's just absolutely a delightful, he's just this wacky, amazing character, and he's so much fun to watch on screen. And it's based on a book. It's a behind the scenes of basically the New York Philharmonic.
How about that? Yeah, that's great. I'll have to check that out.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes and recommend it to your friends. Check out our website at www.moviesthatmatterpodcast.com for links to things we've discussed, and they'll be in the show notes. And if you want to talk to us, you can leave a comment on our Facebook page or on Twitter at Movies Matter Pod. Also check Twitter to find out what movie we're overanalyzing next. And remember, movies matter.
So do you.
We'll see you next time.